what we're going to try out today. Remember, when we're doing these things, we had notes yesterday, and if you missed yesterday, we've got those up and available for you online to be able to stay on top of stuff. But if you were, we've got a couple of examples to work with. So what I'd like to do again, whoever does it again, you're out. Knock the stupidity off. People watching this later are like, dang, this dude goes through the stuff. Yeah, I do some days. So, let's say we were doing number 1 on page 3 in the practice here together. So, as we talked about yesterday as we were doing these, we're going to have 2 fractions. We're making proportions. And so, as we're doing these, it's important that we label stuff, whether it's in our head or on the paper. So instead of just putting like 3 and 2, I want to put that I've got avocados, and I've already got a label on my bottom one with the money. So, how much would it cost to buy 20 avocados? Here's the question. Does the 20 go on top or the bottom of my second fraction? Still here, we're just waiting. Where's my 20 going to go? Oh, fire away.
20, you're on top.
20, you're on top. Okay, because that's where the avocados are. There you go. So, I also can look and see how much would it cost. Wherever that how much or how many question is, that's telling you where your X is going to go. Once we've got that set up, all you've got to do, because I've got a couple of examples even here, is we're going to cross multiply. We're going to do it this way as well. 2 times 20 is 40. And you're going to end up typically with a one-step equation. Now, here's where Hardy, I'm going to go against what I put in my own directions. I know, Hardy, you need to be consistent with your own directions then. But I'm like, how much is it going to cost to buy 20 avocados? You don't get to go to the store and say, well, you know what, we're just going to round to the nearest dollar instead of doing this. So, it's money, that's what we're going to go with. So, $13.33. But that's really all I've got to really work with any of these. Okay, so let's say, because I said I would try to set the example here as well with how these are going to work. So I'm going to try and create one of my own of these. Now I'm not just going to take this, change some numbers and say, I'm buying 5 avocados for $3. I want to do something that's a little bit different. So, I've mentioned before, I like all things to do with barbecue. So, let's say I decided I was going to make my own problem. So, instead, I'm going to change this up. So, let's say that I bought 14 pounds of pulled pork for $210. Now, here's where I'm going to change it up. Mr. Foss across the hall spent $135 on pork, how many pounds did he buy? So I'm using the general idea. It doesn't even have to be money. We've seen it on other things as well. But find something that you like. Okay? If my son was doing this, he'd be talking about, Robux and stuff like this on things. Okay, make it yours. That's fine. But I'm going to have examples here that I can work with now and say, okay, so I bought 14 pounds for $210, because again, the dollar sign's my label. Mr. Foss spent $135. I make sure it stays in the same place. How many pounds did he buy? They're all going to set up similarly. It's just going to be different missing pieces. And so what I'm hoping for through this, as we do this, is that I'm going to have some unique looks at problems like this coming from you, and I want to use them on some future quizzes. And if I use your question, you're going to get some extra points. So the creativity would be a good thing to do here. Do my cross multiply and divide by the 210. With a label, of course, with a label. That's the type of thing I'm going to be looking for with the 3 that you're creating here shortly. So again, you can do it. Write it on a paper like I did here. That's fine. Write it, create it, solve it. You can put it into, you could at least get part of it put into a Google Doc, at least this part, and then maybe you just write the math work on your paper. Again, as long as I can get both, I'm perfectly fine with that. The one other thing I wanted to show you, and then I'll put this back up and kind of freeze it so you can have another example to look at, is over on the back of your practice sheet. So we started here on 3. We're going to flip over to 4. And you're like, oh, these from yesterday again. So I wanted to make mention of a couple of things when we got here to the back that people were asking me questions, good questions about yesterday, and I wanted to make sure we got cleaned up before we started moving on to some other things tomorrow. So the 2 things I kept being asked about were, hey, like on a problem like 8 Hardy, like that's not a fraction, true. So how do I know what goes with what? And here's the answer to that. Whatever you have just a number over here, that's going to go with what's in the bottom of your other fraction, in the denominator. So here, I'd have 3x minus 5 equals negative 14. I'd go through, I'd solve that. The other thing I wanted to make sure I mentioned, you're like, you're not finishing that? I'll come back. Is that anytime you see plus or minus on anything, y minus 8, n minus 4, n plus 4, I would put parentheses around those, and here's why. Let's say we're doing number 10, and we're doing our cross in here. We're like, okay, so 5 times 3 is 15, got it. When I come to code this way, and I'm just going to write it, I'm not going to do my multiplying quite yet. I'll guarantee you if you don't put the parentheses there, a large number of you, a majority of you, would do what I'm about to do on this sticky note, okay? Because might even do the same thing myself. If I didn't have that there, and I'd be like 2n plus 4, I'd just multiply them. I wouldn't know to multiply to both. But that's not what I want to do. That 2 has to go to the n, and it has to go to the 4. Then I can do my 2 steps. I can be like, okay, I want to get in alone. I want to get that 8 out of there, because that's keeping me from getting to n. The opposite of plus is to minus. I got that on my note sheet. Then I get to here. I'm like, okay, what's the opposite of multiplying n by 2? Dividing. And I punch that in the calculator, and whatever I get, I get. Okay, you can even leave it as 7 over 2. That's fine. But I've got to get myself used to some of the details, like, okay, this goes with that. Ooh, I need parentheses around there just so I make sure I distribute when I'm doing things like that. And the other one I was asked about yesterday as well. Thank you. Is going to be, I'm going to scooch this up a little, were the ones like numbers 12 and 13. Now, I saw a lot of good work being done. I saw people looking at these going, okay, I got to multiply to get rid of the fraction. And that's true. But, and let's make note of this, this that I've got boxed in, this has to be alone first. Before I go to distribute, before I go to multiply by something, I got to have that fraction by itself. So I got to deal with this first. I got to do my opposite and minus that 9. Keep the parentheses up here. If I owe my friend $8 and I borrow 9 more, I owe more now. I owe 17. And now you can go back and say, okay, now I still don't like the fraction, Hardy. Well, good. Let's deal with it now that it's isolated. The opposite of dividing by -2 is to multiply. On this side, notice I'm not distributing the -2. Its whole job is just to cancel that out. And once the fraction is gone, now I don't need the parentheses anymore. They've done their job. What's negative times negative? Positive. So negative 17 times -2 is positive 34. And we've only got one step left to go. Okay, yeah, there are several steps on a couple of these. It's true. But it's stuff, again, if we take our time and use the ones that we have at our disposal here, and also the ones that we have at our disposal on our note sheet when we do them, okay, we should be okay, or at least just be making some minor errors that we might need to fix. But reminder, I'm going to do this one, well, I probably will do it again. I'd lie if I say it one more time. Remember, we're still wanting to, oh, I shrunk it. I didn't mean to. There we go.